Imagine walking through a medieval town square. The air is thick with smoke from hearths, the clatter of horse hooves on cobblestones, and the murmurs of townsfolk. At the center, a wooden scaffold rises above the crowd, a stage where justice, or something that passes for it, unfolds. The accused, often women, stand bound, their dignity stripped as the eyes of the community weigh down upon them. This was the theater of medieval justice, where punishment was not just about crime, but about control, fear, and the relentless policing of social norms. The medieval world was one where voices could be dangerous. Not swords or armies, but mere words could threaten the fragile social order. Women, particularly those who spoke too boldly, questioned authority, or defied expected roles, often found themselves in the crosshairs of a system that used shame as a weapon. This is a story of power, control, and the many ways society sought to silence female voices. In a time when literacy was rare and information traveled slowly, the court was both a public arena and a tool of propaganda. Trials were spectacles designed to reinforce social hierarchies. The punishments were symbolic, deliberately humiliating, and often gendered. A man might face physical punishment for theft or violence, but women frequently faced chastisement for behaviors deemed immoral or insubordinate. Talking too much, refusing to marry, or challenging male authority. One of the most infamous tools of silencing was the scold's bridle, a cruel iron mask that locked the mouth and sometimes included a gag to prevent speaking. Imagine wearing such a device, metal biting into your skin, the crowd jeering, every whisper or scream muffled. This purpose was not merely punishment but public spectacle. It broadcasted a stark warning. Speak, and you will be made an example. These devices were not isolated curiosities. They were part of a broader network of controls that included stocks, pillories, and public shaming rituals. Town criers announced crimes, neighbors participated in mockery, and humiliation became both punishment and social lesson. For women, this meant that a moment of defiance could ripple outward, jeopardizing family honor, social standing, and personal freedom. Consider the branks, another device used in England and Scotland. Similar to the scold's bridle, it consisted of a metal framework locked around the head, often with a gag to restrict speech. The wearer could not eat, drink, or speak normally, forcing total submission to the authority of the court and community. Historical records tell of women paraded through town, bells clanging, crowds laughing or jeering, every step an echo of societal condemnation. Shame, in these contexts, was more than psychological, it was a form of governance. Medieval communities operated under unwritten codes that prized conformity and obedience, particularly from women. Deviations from expected behavior could prompt interventions that combined physical restraint with public mockery. In essence, women's bodies became instruments for enforcing social order, their speech policed not only by law but by community surveillance. Yet, not all women were passive victims. Records reveal subtle forms of resistance, whispered defiance, coded communication, and solidarity among women. Some endured punishment silently, turning humiliation into quiet resilience. Others used humor or irony to challenge the authority of their oppressors, reminding us that even in the darkest systems, human agency persisted. The interplay between law, gender, and spectacle raises profound questions about justice. Were these punishments truly about crime, or were they mechanisms for maintaining power? For medieval authorities, controlling the female voice was central to sustaining hierarchies, both in the household and the wider community. Silence was demanded not only through fear of pain but through the fear of social exile, ridicule, and permanent shame. Even today, the echoes of these practices linger. Modern scholarship often uncovers the layers of meaning behind such rituals, revealing how gender and control intersected in everyday life. By examining these devices and punishments, we glimpse a world where justice was public, morality was policed, and women's voices were perilously powerful. Historical accounts provide chilling details, yet they also offer insight into resilience, cunning, and survival. Women found ways to navigate these oppressive structures, leaving traces in court records, diaries, and oral histories. Their experiences challenge us to reconsider assumptions about power, justice, and the human spirit in the face of institutionalized oppression. From the scold's bridle to the pillory, from public shaming to corporal punishment, medieval justice often targeted women in ways that intertwined morality, obedience, and spectacle. Each device, each ritual was a message. Speak, defy, or resist, and the consequences will be both public and enduring. The pillory and stocks were more than instruments of physical restraint. They were stages for moral theater. Imagine being locked into a wooden frame in the town square, your hands and head bound, exposed to the sun, rain, and the jeers of neighbors. For women accused of immorality, adultery, gossip, or disobedience, these devices were a means to turn their very bodies into public lessons. Townsfolk would throw rotten vegetables, mud, or even worse insults. Every word, every throw reinforced the idea that stepping outside prescribed roles invited communal punishment. Women's attire, their posture, and even their facial expressions became weapons in the court's arsenal. Officials often designed punishments to humiliate the body, exaggerating features, making gestures awkward, or exposing them in ways that violated social norms. One shocking yet common practice involved the cucking stool, a chair or platform used to dunk women in water repeatedly. The ritual symbolized cleansing but carried profound social humiliation, reinforcing notions that women who spoke out or defied norms were unclean and needed public correction. Beyond the physical, verbal shaming played a central role. Town criers would announce alleged crimes in poetic, rhyming couplets for maximum memorability, ensuring the offender's humiliation would linger long after the punishment ended. Gossip and rumor became tools of enforcement. A single accusation, true or not, could irreversibly damage a woman's reputation, affecting marriage prospects, social standing, and even survival. Some communities also used symbolic props to underscore the perceived crime. Witches, for instance, were made to wear pointed hats, carry brooms, or parade with effigies. Women accused of sexual impropriety might be forced to wear signs detailing their offense or carry objects marking their shame. The crowd, hungry for spectacle, became an extension of authority. In a sense, the punishment was incomplete without the participation of witnesses, reinforcing social hierarchies through collective judgment. Medieval law often blurred the line between morality and criminality, particularly for women. Adultery, while sometimes punished privately among men, was made publicly shameful for women. Legal codes emphasized the protection of male honor, property, and lineage. Courts operated under the logic that controlling women's speech and behavior maintained social cohesion, yet this logic often translated into brutal enforcement mechanisms. Public humiliation also intersected with religion. Clergy often endorsed or even orchestrated punishment rituals, framing them as opportunities for repentance. Pilgrimages, public confessions, or forced recitation of sins in the church were not mere spiritual exercises. They were mechanisms of social control. Women's morality was monitored both by secular and ecclesiastical authorities, leaving them vulnerable to surveillance from all corners of medieval life. Despite this oppression, historical records reveal moments of ingenuity and quiet resistance. Women would memorize prayers, sing coded songs, or use clever gestures to convey defiance or solidarity with fellow victims. Some challenged court decisions through petitions or appeals to sympathetic officials. Others harnessed storytelling, folklore, and satire to critique authority subtly. Even under the shadow of punishment, the human spirit found ways to endure and communicate. Fear, however, was pervasive. The anticipation of public shaming could enforce compliance even before any act of punishment. Townsfolk internalized the morality that authorities imposed, policing each other through gossip and social pressure. Women learned to navigate this complex web of observation, sometimes complying outwardly while subverting authority in private. These dynamics reveal that medieval control was not solely enforced by law. It was embedded in everyday interactions, rituals, and communal expectations. Another striking example of female-targeted humiliation involved the shame mask or brank, where the offender's mouth was locked and sometimes a bell attached. The sound marked her as a danger to communal harmony, literally broadcasting her crime to anyone within earshot. Historical court documents recount women forced to parade in these masks for hours, subjected to laughter, insults, and sometimes physical abuse. Such punishments reinforced the idea that women who spoke freely or transgressed moral codes were not just disobedient. They were spectacles, cautionary tales for all. Punishments also reflected social hierarchies and gendered expectations. Wealthy women might face fines or symbolic public reprimands, while poorer women endured prolonged, humiliating exposure. The law was not blind. It reinforced power structures, ensuring that the most vulnerable bore the brunt of punishment, while the elite could maintain influence and privilege. The psychological impact of these practices was profound. Fear of shame, ridicule, and ostracism shaped behavior as effectively as any physical punishment. The public spectacle ensured the lesson was witnessed, remembered, and retold. Even after the punishment ended, the social stigma persisted. Women's mobility, relationships, and sense of self were constrained by the memory of what the community had witnessed, proving that shame was not just a moment. It was a tool of long-term control. In addition to official punishments, informal public shaming played a key role. Communities would spread rumors, ostracize women from markets or religious gatherings, and socially police behavior in everyday life. These unwritten rules often proved more powerful than formal law, embedding control within the very fabric of communal life. A glance, a whisper, or a public snub could have consequences as severe as any judicial punishment. Understanding these dynamics reveals that medieval justice was never merely about crime. It was about social cohesion, hierarchy, and the policing of gender norms. By focusing on the body, the voice, and the public eye, authorities ensured that punishment resonated far beyond the moment of enforcement. Women's experiences were central to this system, illustrating the intersection of gender, power, and spectacle in the medieval imagination. Through the lens of history, we can see how these mechanisms were designed to sustain control, instill fear, and normalize the suppression of female voices. But they also illuminate resilience, creativity, and the persistence of agency in environments designed to silence. Women navigated, subverted, and survived these structures, leaving traces of resistance for historians to uncover centuries later. Despite the relentless systems of control, some women found ways to reclaim power within the oppressive structures of medieval society. Cleverness, disguise, and storytelling became forms of subtle resistance. Accounts from the period describe women who feigned obedience while secretly organizing networks of support, passing information, or protecting one another from the harshest judgments. Even the act of maintaining dignity under public humiliation became a quiet rebellion, sending a message that the human spirit could endure even under extreme scrutiny. In towns across Europe, city ordinances and guild regulations targeted women who stepped beyond their socially prescribed roles. Female merchants, for instance, risked public censure or fines for negotiating prices or asserting authority in marketplaces. Women who challenged male authority in legal disputes were often forced into humiliating spectacles to restore perceived order. These rituals were carefully crafted to teach lessons not just to the accused, but to all observers, creating a culture of caution and conformity enforced through embarrassment and fear. Religious institutions amplified these mechanisms of control. Monasteries, convents, and parish churches often collaborated with civil authorities to enforce moral discipline. Women accused of gossip, heresy, or sexual transgression might be required to make public confession, kneel before crowds, or undertake penances that involved carrying symbols of shame. Bells, banners, and inscriptions marked their bodies and deeds for communal scrutiny. The intersection of moral instruction and legal punishment ensured that female obedience became a matter of both spiritual and civic concern. One of the most striking elements of medieval punishment was the creative use of symbolism. Officials often designed punishments to exaggerate perceived transgressions visually. Women might be forced to wear contraptions that distorted their posture, or carry boards detailing their alleged crimes. These acts transformed the individual into a living allegory of sin and misbehavior, teaching a story to the community. Punishment was as much about narrative as it was about enforcement, blending spectacle, shame, and moral education into a single theatrical act. Despite the oppressive frameworks, medieval chronicles reveal instances of solidarity among women. Shared experiences of humiliation fostered covert networks of empathy and resistance. Mothers whispered advice to daughters on avoiding public disgrace. Neighbors offered discreet support to women facing punitive parades. Friends used coded language to share warnings and information. These subtle acts remind us that even in the most restrictive environments, human connection and mutual protection persisted. The focus on women's bodies and voices was deliberate, reflecting broader concerns about power and control. Authorities understood that visibility and audibility were potent tools. Controlling what women could say, where they could be, and how they appeared allowed leaders to maintain hierarchies and reinforce social norms. Punishments were often public because the act of witnessing enforced internalized discipline. People conformed not just out of fear of law, but out of fear of collective judgment. Some punishments were designed to leave enduring reminders. Pillories and stocks were permanent fixtures in towns, serving as daily reminders of what happened to those who transgressed. In some cases, towns would erect statues, plaques, or symbolic markers commemorating particularly notorious offenders, cementing the lessons in physical form. Memory itself became a tool of control. By turning shame into a monument, authorities ensured that fear could persist across generations. Stories from legal records also illustrate the importance of timing and ceremony. Punishments were often scheduled to coincide with festivals, market days, or religious celebrations, maximizing the number of witnesses. This planning amplified the communal impact of shame. Children observed, neighbors participated, and the lesson became part of the social fabric. The timing transformed punishment into performance, intertwining entertainment with instruction, morality, and enforcement. Beyond punishment, the medieval obsession with regulating female behavior had broader social consequences. Women learned to self-police, anticipating scrutiny before it arrived. Gossip, rumor, and public expectation became extensions of legal authority. In this way, the mere possibility of shame influenced daily decisions. How to dress, what to say, and where to go. Control was embedded not just in law but in culture, ritual, and the very rhythm of communal life. Interestingly, not all recorded punishments were purely punitive. Some had rehabilitative aims, seeking confession, repentance, or reintegration into the community. Public shaming could be framed as moral correction, reinforcing norms while allowing the offender to return to society. Yet even these restorative acts relied on spectacle, humiliation, and gendered expectations, underscoring that control was inseparable from performance. Women's experiences under these systems reveal the interplay of power, spectacle, and social norms. Medieval authorities recognized that controlling female voices, through shame, ritual, and public scrutiny, was central to maintaining hierarchical order. Every public humiliation reinforced the legitimacy of authority while shaping communal behavior. Yet, within this oppressive framework, women demonstrated resilience, creativity, and agency, finding ways to navigate and sometimes subvert the very structures meant to silence them. In reflecting on these histories, we gain insight into the mechanisms by which societies enforce conformity, the enduring power of shame, and the ways in which control intersects with gender. Medieval punishments were more than acts of retribution. They were complex performances that intertwined morality, law, and public spectacle. By examining these rituals, we understand how societies once disciplined not only the body, but the mind, the voice, and the very social fabric. The echoes of these practices reach into modern consciousness. Public shaming, social surveillance, and gendered expectations persist in subtle forms, reminding us that the past is never entirely past. By studying these histories, we confront the human capacity for both cruelty and ingenuity, and the ways in which control has been enacted through time. Medieval punishments, though distant, offer lessons in the power of shame, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring struggle for voice, agency, and dignity.